Good evening and welcome to Easton Book Festival's capstone event. It is the concluding episode of our National Novel Writing Month series. We started with a National Novel Writing Month introduction back in October, and then we had a special sort of booster program in the middle of November, and now we're back to find out how did it go. And before I turn things over to Laurel Wenson of the Greater Lehigh Valley Writers Group, I'd just like to comment that the Easton Book Festival is sponsored by the Greater Easton Development Partnership, by Lafayette Humanities Center, by Pre-K for PA and Start Strong PA, and by the Siegel Museum. And now I'm happy to turn things over to Laurel Wenson of the Greater Lehigh Valley Writers Group.
Thanks so much, Andy. And we really want to say thank you to the Easton Book Festival for having a panel for National Novel Writing Month throughout this time. We had a great session back in October. We had a good follow-up in November, or yeah, I think it was like around 8th or 9th of November, just before we were starting to get into the nitty-gritty of it all. And now we're finishing it up. I do have some of the panelists that were with us for the first two sessions, and we have a few new folks for this session who are from the local chapter of National Novel Writing Month, the Lehigh Valley Novel Writing Group, and they call themselves the Lehigh Valley Reinbold, LV Reinbold. So you'll getting to meet some of them as well. I think we'll start out with some introductions, and why don't we start off with Mitzi? You can introduce yourself first.
Okay, my name is Mitzi Flyte. Reinbold. Mitzi Flyte is my writing name because that's the first name I had when I was published. So I kept that for my writing name. And I've been writing since I was 12, got my first rejection at the age of 12. I am now 73, many more rejections later. I have done some professional writing and some non-professional writing, free stuff. So, and I've been a member of Glivwig since almost its inception. So I'm the old lady of the group here, and she's still writing.
Thanks, Mitzi. Why don't we take it over to Bob? Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
My name's Bob Brad. I've been writing since I was about the same age when Mitzi started, but you know, that was later. I've been doing Nano off and on for about 10 years. Last year was my first win, and then this year I worked with the other Lehigh Valley people, and we had a really good year.
All right, continuing on, let's go to Susan Reabuck.
Hi, I'm Susan Reabuck. I've been writing, well, since I was young, but I only finished my first novel 4 years ago now. And I've been doing Nano for the last 5 years. The first year I didn't make it, but the last 4 years I did. And this year I got about 53,000 words, so.
All right, let's go to Kate. So, Kate Zane.
Hi, I'm Katie Zane. I am a math teacher, but I love to write and read. And I have been doing Nano since 2007. I have never failed to get my 50,000 words in November. I usually don't make it for camp, but I am dedicated to my November craft, including some years where I have written 30,000 words in the last couple of days just to make it. And I have since been challenged by my local writing group to write 50,000 in 24 hours, which I did 3 times. That is very taxing. I will probably never do it again. But I am very, very into Nano and have been for a really long time.
Kate, you didn't see my jaw drop when I said 24 hours. It's like, that's a new level of insanity. So we might have to talk about that later. Let's go over to Sue Monroe and see how you're doing.
Okay, hi, I'm Sue Monroe. I am the Youth Services Librarian for the Emmaus Public Library. I'm going to be in the upcoming Glivwig anthology. This is my 3rd story in those anthologies. I've been writing I've been making up stories for as long as I can remember. The first time I knew that I could actually write something was when I was 18, and my English teacher got to see something that I wrote and said, "Why aren't you writing like this in class?" Well, because I didn't know that I was supposed to be writing like that. I've been doing Nano since, I just looked it up, since November 9th, 2003. And I finish sometimes I don't. It's all about the writing and the time spent writing. So I also work with writer's prompts over at the Emmaus Public Library Facebook page, and also have a teen writing group for the library.
That's awesome, Sue. All right, my name is Laurel Wenson. I wrote a lot when I was young, and then I stopped writing over the years for many, many years. I did 15 plus years teaching English and theater to the homeschool community in various co-ops, and retired in 2016. And now I just do some online classes with some of the homeschool community and tutor. I've also just recently started coaching and self-publishing with somebody who's just published her first book. And that was kind of exciting to help her out. I started Nano at the encouragement of my daughter, who has been doing it. She is 21 and she's been doing it since, this was her 11th year. She just finished. I think she's won 8 of them. And after I retired, my daughter basically said, "You have got to write down all your experiences of directing and put them in a book." And I finally had the time. So I wrote my first book in Camp Nano in 2017, and went on to self-publish that in 2018. And then I wrote my first young adult novel in 2018, regular Nano, and that was published this past summer. Wrote book 2 of this series in July of Camp Nano this year, and that's just been published now. So this was book 3 that I was working on. I did hit my word count, nowhere near the done yet, but I'm in it for the long haul. I love the community. I love some of the people that I have met. And I think that you will find that it doesn't matter whether or not you hit the 50K. I know that so many people are driven by that, but I've met so many people and learned so much about just the process, and whether or not, you know, you do the normal route or you take your own path. I did want to just really quickly explain what Nano is, in case anyone's popping in and hasn't seen the other 2 panels that we did. National Novel Writing Month began back in the early 2000s. I think they started with about 21 people. It is basically a nonprofit organization, and their mission is to provide all writers the tools, the structure, the community, and the encouragement that they need so that they can find their voice, achieve their goals, and create new worlds on and off the page. That's from their website. They began, like I said, very modestly with 21 people. Within a couple of years, they were up to about 5,000 people. Last year, there were almost 500,000 that took place, including 100,000 young writers, which I think was really neat. This year, today I went and I checked their website, and they don't have final statistics yet, but as of right now, they had 798,000 active novelists for this year, and 367,000 plus novels completed. So that just shows how much the writing community has grown through this website. I don't know if they had any idea when they started this what they were creating, but it is really, truly amazing. And I think most people that find Nano stick around. From the people that I have met, that seems to be the indication. So right now we're gonna, that was the overall statistics, and they may not be final. That was just what I found on the website now. A lot of people are still writing their surveys and getting those in. So we'll hear more from them. And I'll talk a little bit more later about what's coming up next for Nano. But I know that there is a local group. We weren't able to get those statistics, but I know that it's a pretty good sized group that has met year after year after year. Kate, I'm going to actually put you on the spot. This is not on the outline, but where you have that experience. Can you explain a little bit about the whole bead thing? Because I know that you have the nickname as the bead goddess, and I think that is just a neat, that whole thing is neat.
Yeah. So I've been involved with the local group for probably about 6 years, maybe a little longer. And when I started, Nikki was our ML, our municipal liaison, and she had picked up the idea to motivate the group by doing something similar to how Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts earn badges. She created this system where you earned beads, and you could make a bracelet or you could make a necklace or whatever you wanted with your little beads that you got. And she had a few, there were different challenges that you would meet. Some of them were serious, like halfway. Some of them were a little funnier, like typing with your nose or typing with your pinkies, which are fun but not very productive. And then there were some other ones that we added when I took over. When Nikki stepped down, Jamie and Roxy took over as MLs, and I said that I would step in and do the beads because they were so motivating for me. And I am very much motivated by a challenge. Hey, here, meet this milestone, and I'm going to meet it, whatever it takes, because that's the kind of person I am. And so I said, well, then I'll do the beads. And so I increased the challenges tenfold so that we could make bead albino weasels, which are the mascot for our region, our weasels, albino weasels specifically. So if you earn most of the beads, you have enough to make them. Last year and the year before, we were able to get together in person and make them. Obviously we did not this year, but I did mail beads out to the people who participated. Bob helped me put the beads together, and it was a lot of fun. But we've added things such as alliteration, going on the forums for Nano, putting your book in on Nano's website, your project in on Nano's website. So we really want to encourage our group to participate in the Nano program, but also to challenge themselves, including a create your own challenge. So, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was it doesn't matter if you win or not win, quote unquote. Everybody, if you've written more than you had at the beginning of November, then that's a success. And that's why I love the bead program, because you can earn a ton of beads without ever hitting 50,000 words. And being able to create your own challenge to challenge yourself is such a special thing for me. We did make a kids version where you would basically, the parents or whoever would help the child fill in milestones. They may not hit 50,000, but they can fill in their own milestones and things. So we do have that available as well. So that's our bead program. I am in charge of it, and it's a lot of fun. And everybody seems to be very motivated by it. We had a lot of people who said that this year. So
Thanks, Kate. I know I was at a couple of write-ins 2 years ago at the library, and I remember seeing the beads, had no idea what they were about. And I just kind of got into my zone and never really, if I had known more about what they were, I think I might have been much more motivated to get some beads. But Sue talked about them at a previous panel, so I really wanted to hear more about these beads. That sounds pretty neat. All right, we're now going to talk about, we've given a little bit about some of the overall statistics of how things went with Nano, but now we're going to do just a wrap up of how each one of us on the panel did. I know that many of you who may be watching may have participated in Nano, and whether or not, as Kate said, whether or not you got to your 50K or not, just participating. And the whole goal of Nano is to get you into better writing habits and more regular writing habits. So we're going to talk about our own personal statistics and where we are, what we wrote. Did we finish? Were we a rebel who basically does not participate in the same way? So let's just share our own personal stories as to how we each did. And why don't we start this one with Sue Monroe?
Well, I did not make 50,000. I started out right off the bat at 12:01 on November 1st and wrote 2 paragraphs for my story that was supposed to be a science fiction story. And then life kind of gave me a sock in the eye. So I started writing a lot of different things. I was trying just to write whatever it was that I could possibly think of to write. I wrote a lot of memoir things. And then a story idea came to me just kind of off the bat, and I started writing and working on that. by the end of the month, I had 20,000 words, which 20,000 words is respectable. If it was not my goal, and if I ended up with a piece of story that I want to take further that I was not planning on when I started in November. So I completely switched directions and wrote an entirely different story.
Can you also share a little bit, Sue, about, I know you do the teen writing group. Can you talk about how some of those kids did, or?
Well, they wrote, they most certainly wrote, because we wrote together one night. We had a write-in. That's what the NaNoWrite, when we all write together, we had a write-in. But November is kind of a difficult month for kids to write. It's a difficult month for anybody who works with the public to write, because there's so much going on. But they did write, they did not get to their word counts. But we discussed it 2 weeks ago in December, first Thursday of the month, second Thursday of the month, and we sat and talked about it and talked about what we would do in the future. So they did write, they just didn't write a whole lot. Oh.
Thanks so much. How about we skip over to the other Sue Reabuck.
All right, so I started the month. I was intending on working on my paranormal romance series that I've been trying to get into for quite a while. And instead, I got probably about 10,000 words into that and switched over to a book that I have been trying to finish for almost 2 years. And I finished that, so yay. I finally found my ending. And then I was so excited about that. And then I went off of the writing novel stuff, and I wrote out 300 Christmas cards for all of the kids at our local elementary school. So I counted that because I put a personal note in each one. So I counted those words as part of my 53,000. So I did about 25,000 in actual novel writing, and then a lot more figured the kids could use a boost this year since they're all virtual. Could use some nice little note from somebody.
That's a really creative, again, that just shows the different ways that people take their paths, that, that your word count is your writing and your goal is to get to 50,000. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be on that one novel. So that's exciting. And I'm sure that those cards meant a lot. So that's neat. Let's skip over to Mitzi. Tell us about your month.
Weird, that's to say the least. I started with, I've been working on this one novel for too long, and I thought, let me finish it for Nano. And I had about 20,000 words already written. If I do 50, that's a good amount for the total book. So I started. And you know what happens sometimes when you're writing a book for a long time? You get to the point where you don't like the characters, you don't like the story, you're tired of it, and you go. On top of that, I discovered later that I have a spinal issue that gives me pain when I use my arms and my hands, and typing started to hurt. So I slowed down. And that's my excuse for saying that I did not get my 50,000 in. I did get about 20 in, which I think was very good considering what kind of pain I had off and on. But I've won Nano several times over the last few years, and I still have the books together in my notebooks. They're all printed out and ready to go. Whoever wants them can have them. I have to self-publish. That's where I stop. I stop. And a couple of you are smiling at me. I might not be the only one who stops there. I sort of like, okay, all I want to do is write. I want somebody else to do the hard work afterwards. I just want to write. So maybe Nano needs another project, getting your book out there type of project. But I'll do it every year. I'll do November every year. They're not going to have to. They can't fix my spinal problem. It's what I've got forever. So I'll just have to take it slow, and not be upset if I don't make the 50K. And that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
It's a great story, Mitzi. And I know that I've gotten to hear some of the stories she's been working on, and it's going to be a great book when it's finally finished. I'm looking forward to hearing it. Let's skip over to Bob. Why don't we hear about your personal statistics for the month?
So I came into the month having no idea what I was going to do. I think like October 30th was when I finally got a very rough outline of what I wanted to write, which is not normal for me. I usually do a pretty heavy outline. We started off really well. I hit 50K on, I want to say the 14th, thanks to the support of the group and the fact that we got into a fight with Scranton. So I jammed out like 20K one weekend because we couldn't let Scranton beat us. That's not okay. And then I spent the rest of the month chugging along. I came out at about, I think I was at 101K at the end of the month. The last day was a day because I came into it at about 80, and I was like, I got to make the 100. So I did like 20K in one day, and that was too many words for one day. I don't ever want to do that again. About half of that was on a novel that I don't know that I'll ever do anything with. Like, I had a lot of fun writing it, but it's not, I'm not particularly proud of it. And then the rest was a lot of smaller pieces. I started doing small requests for people when they hit their word count goals, which was cool because then that helped motivate the people we were working with, and it would give me an excuse to write just 3K of absolute whatever anybody asked for. Most of it was pretty weird and fluffy, but it was a fun way to just pump some words.
I'm learning. This is good to know for future years. I started again, like Sue did at 12:01. I was determined to get, I think I got about 1,000 words written that first day. I think I got like 10,000 written in the first 3 days. And those were probably some of my better numbers. And then I kind of went into, I tried to always shoot for 2,000 a day. And I think I only missed that 3 or 4 days out of the month. Hit my 50K on the 21st or the 22nd. And then for the next several days, I think I wrote a sentence each day because I was so tired of writing and I was just so sick of the book. And I was working on book 3 of this series, and like Mitzi is, I really just don't like this particular book. And book 2 I loved. Book 3 I'm kind of like, God, I don't even know if I want to read this myself. So I know that there's a lot more revision in this book, and that's why maybe I don't like it as much. But I did sit down and write every single day, whether it was a sentence or I got, sometimes a few hundred words in. As of right now, I am up to about 61,000, I think, and I have about 7 or 8 chapters to finish up. So I'm hoping to finish by the end of December. That was the goal that I set for myself. We'll see. Now I might try some of these other choices that people have given me ideas for. All right, so we've kind of just shown everybody that not everybody gets to 50K and not everybody sticks with one project. So if you feel like all the people that go to Nano sit down on, November 1st and come out on November 30th with a complete novel, over 50,000 words, that's all they've worked on, now you know that that's not always the case. So you are totally normal wherever you are and whatever you're doing for Nano. As long as you're writing, that's really the goal. I'd like to really just kind of touch base now. I know some of you have talked a little bit about things, but what was your biggest challenge of the month and how did you deal with it? We all hit, I know that we had said in our November 8th session when we did the second week, just heading into that mid-month slump. Everyone's excited at the beginning of the month and then they're excited at the end when they're getting close. But that middle, those 30,000 for the people that get to 50K are sometimes just sludge. I mean, you just feel like you're never going to get there. But what are some of life's challenges, some of the other challenges and how did you deal with it? And let's start this time with, let's see, let's go to Katie.
So my biggest challenge is that I don't write well at home. I have 2 kids living in my house. I have 3 cats. I have a husband who never leaves, and I love them all very, very much. But it is very difficult for me to focus when I'm here. We did make a space for me down in the basement, which is where I am, though I'm shivering because it's chilly. But even having a space, I'm constantly going, oh, I didn't switch the laundry, or oh, I need to go do the dishes, or oh, the litter boxes need to be cleaned, whatever. And so typically I spend a lot of my November in Panera or at the library, and I can't go to those places and just sit and write. And so I knew from the beginning of the month, I was like, this is going to be difficult. I ended up spending a fair amount of time sitting in my car in parking lots, which is kind of weird, but it worked. And then Bob and I actually teamed up and we decided to merge our COVID bubbles. And so I was able to go to Bob's and write at his place, and he could come and write here. And so that made it, I don't know that I would have done it. I don't know that I would have made it without. I also made the 100K with Bob. It was that last day was tough. But between that and then our virtual write-ins, which we had many virtual events, that really helped. Our Discord was great. But for me, that was definitely the biggest challenge this year. Was my routines were just completely different.
I think that we'll probably find that you're not the only one there, but let's go to Sue Reabuck and see, what was your biggest challenge of the month?
Well, this year, of course, with COVID, of course, I have my kids at home doing homeschool. And then, of course, I work for the school too. So, other years at 3:15, we were done for the day. Now, with everything being virtual, I'm getting emails and texts and stuff till 10 o'clock at night. So that window where I could sit and write sort of got small. I ended up spending a lot of late nights with some coffee. That was my biggest challenge. There was just a lot more chaos in the house this year than normal.
That is so true. Mitzi, what was your biggest challenge? I know that you talked about the pain, and that's probably it, but did you have any other challenges that came along the way?
One of the things I found, the years that I won Nano were the years that I was still working. I used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and write until about 7. I did that every day. I was much more disciplined. I'm now retired, and you think, oh, she's got all the time in the world. Unfortunately, that's what I think. I've got all the time in the world. And it's very hard to manage yourself when you think that. So my problem is managing my time. And the other problem is I like to read. I've read over 70 books so far this year. One of them has been Laurel's, and it was very good. So I have her second book on my to be read pile, which is very high. So that's my problem. It's not that I have little kids running around or a job that's calls me or anything like that. It's my own self-management. I need to get myself under control. I think a lot of writers are like that.
I think that's really true as well. We're the only ones that can really give ourselves the discipline. And that's one of the reasons that Nano really helps us. It's helping us to get the discipline that we need. Sue Monroe, let's talk about your biggest challenge of the month.
Well, I learned a new phrase in 2020, and that phrase is allostatic load. It is the load that you bear when you're living through a traumatic sequence of events. And as I spoke about before, last year and the year before were quite difficult years for me. 2020 has pretty much not been very much different. I've been talking to a number of people about the fact that, yes, you have time to write, but do you always feel like it when you have so many other things that you are dealing with in your life? And the allostatic load for 2020 and for the COVID
pandemic has been very heavy. I am not the only person that I've spoken to who had difficulty sitting and writing and focusing on something that was not COVID-19 or was not to do with things that you're dealing with and managing your life. So I would say that we're living in interesting times. The problem is that they're not necessarily translating into interesting on the page. And that is part of what I am running into. I wrote a lot this entire year about the time, because one of the things that was talked about at the beginning of 2020, when we were beginning to see the pandemic and it was changing everybody's lives, was to journal so that people had a record of what occurred to everybody, all the ordinary people that didn't make headlines. And while I did get some of that written, I also found it enormously tedious and boring. I really didn't want to read that. And I try to write things that I will want to read. So that was part of the issue for me this year. I mean, November's always busy when you work with the public because, of course, Thanksgiving and all of the different holidays. But if I'm going to write a novel, if I'm going to write 50,000 words, I want to write something that I want to be able to read when I'm done with it. I don't want to write something that's tedious that I'm going to never, ever want to look at again. So I found that that was my challenge to start. And as I said, the weird thing was that out of that came a sort of speculative fiction story that I really was not expecting. And it just kind of appeared from all of that together. And that's when I really started writing. And that's why I got my 20,000 words. I didn't quite make it halfway, but I did get to 20,000. So.
Thanks, Sue. That's a neat story. But Bob, why don't you tell us about your biggest challenge for the month?
For me, it was finding the balance between working with and socializing with the group and actually getting my writing done. I've done Nano entirely solo. I've done Nano with small groups, big groups, and this group was awesome. Shout out to Fran and Sarah and everybody else and Jamie. But there were definitely nights where I sat down and talked to people for 2 hours and then said, oh, I'm supposed to be in bed in 15 minutes and I've wrote 200 words today. So then I had to, stay up late and try and smash them out. So I don't regret that I spent a lot of time talking to the group, but definitely finding that balance was a challenge some nights.
Okay, I think that's very true as well. I think that the pandemic has definitely created a whole new set of challenges this year that hopefully we'll never have to deal with again with the way that we did this year. I found for me, because people were all home, I tend to like to write in the morning, but this year I did most of my writing late at night from like 9 to midnight because it was the time when it was quiet and there wasn't laundry to do and there wasn't other people. And so my whole schedule was kind of thrown out the window, which I don't know why, it's just the way it worked out. Writing wise, I think my biggest challenge was I'm a plotter. I have a detailed outline that I start with. And this year for book 3 in my series, I had started the story as a dual point of view. There were 2 characters that were going to alternate back and forth. And I got to like chapter 10, I believe, when I realized it wasn't working. I had to choose one of those characters and tell the story through a single point of view, which basically meant the rest of my, every other chapter wasn't going to work anymore. And so I did so much more pantsing and flying by the seat of my pants this time. And I think that's part of the reason I just don't like the story, because it's not going the way I wanted it to. It's going the way the characters are telling me it has to. And as a writer and as a control person, I know a lot of people understand when you say, you tell the writers this, or you tell the characters this is how it's going to go, and they laugh at you and say, no, it's not going to go that way at all. So I had to learn to adjust. And then the only other real challenge is that my main character in this book, my series has to do with eating disorders. And this particular story is the personal story of the girl who is the recovering anorexic. And getting inside that mindset is a little bit more of a challenge than I thought it might be. I spent hours watching YouTube videos of people in recovery. I have a few people I know that have had family issues that I've talked to. So I did a lot more research. And so it was a very educational month for me. I learned a lot about myself and I learned a lot about the writing process, but it's definitely been the most challenging book because of that. And like I said, it didn't go the way I wanted it to. And so I'm a little pissed off about that, but I am going to finish the book. And then I know the revision process is just going to be hell this year, but that's okay, because that's what it's about. And I know that in the end, it will be a great story. I just have to be willing to put the time in to make it that way. All right, let's move on. I know that we've talked a little bit about the resources used. People have already talked about some of the things that they have done. So if there was something that we haven't already covered, and I think what I'll do on this one, because I can at least see all of you now, even though the people that are watching this are only seeing me. If there's anyone here that has anything more to add about that what resources did they use this month, aside from what we've already covered in some of the groups, if you can kind of let me know, and then I can call on you. Otherwise, I know one of the, go ahead, Katie.
So Bob and I worked with Discord. Jamie set up an amazing Discord for us. I don't really know what I'm doing with it, but Bob does, which is part of why he's now in charge of things. But one of the things that was really helpful is that there's a bot on Discord that runs sprints for us. And so it would time us and tell us when we were done. And then we would put in our word counts and it would tell you how many words per minute you wrote, or sometimes words per hour when we were having a really bad moment. And it was very motivating. And we really encouraged our group. It was more about competing with yourself. I know I can make X amount of words in 15 minutes and I have to hold myself to that standard. But that sprint bot on Discord was one of the best resources of any that I have seen in the past few years.
Okay, anybody else have, Bob, you can carry on with that.
So I've had Scrivener for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. Somebody got it for me as a gift. And this was the first year I really dove into it. And I spent the first week and a half of the month kicking myself for not using it sooner, because it's just so much nicer for a large project like this than typing in Word or Google Docs or whatever.
I've heard people talk about Scrivener, so that's something. And I know that National Novel Writing, if you participate, I think they give you a discount on Scrivener too. So that's just a little further lead that you can look up if you'd like. I know that Mitzi and I were both involved in the Glivwig's Writers Cafe, and one of the things that happened because of the pandemic, it used to meet monthly at the Palmer Library, but when the pandemic hit, it went to a weekly format online and Zoom, and that has really become like my favorite night of the week. It's just, you get some great critique partners out of it. I find that I'm a solitary writer, but I need the buddies for encouragement and feedback. And so to be able to read and get that instant feedback has really, really been a wonderful tool. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit, Mitzi, too, and just the Writers Cafe and what you've gotten out of it.
Well, as an old Glivwig member, I keep stressing that Glivwig has been around since the middle of the 1990s, and I've been a member since probably 1995, 1996. I've been involved in it off and on since then. And I used to live in the Easton area. Then I got married for the second time and moved to the Reading area. I see Susan laughing, and both Sues are laughing, and maybe even Kate too. But, it's one of those things that we do. We fall in love, we get married, no matter how old you are. and I moved to the Reading area, and I lost all my writing buddies, all of them, 50 miles away, 100-mile round trip. So Cafe Zoom has been for me restoring my writing and my connections. And because my writing connection was Glivwig for the most part. Now I have it back again. It's the best thing COVID did. The only good thing COVID did was bring people together like this. We wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for what had happened. So we have to think of the positive parts of a terrible year. And there are some. And for me, it's being on Zoom with fellow writers like you guys. Best thing in the world that's happened to me. And not a 100-mile round trip in my future.
I don't know, Mitzi, I think that we should do a writer's retreat in Ole sometime, and we'll all come to you for a weekend, and that will be a lot of fun. I'll even bring wine. So if anybody else wants to join us. Let's talk a little bit now, just in terms of Nano is over, and most people have probably taken a little bit of a break. That's what they even tell you. December is usually kind of like put it on the shelf and forget about it if you're not still trying to finish it. But what are the plans that you might have now for the coming year? I know that Nano does have something called What's Next, or Now What? Now What it's called. For January and February, it's really going into editing and revision. They actually have a 24-page workbook in editing, a free download that you can get on Nano. I looked at it today and I downloaded it myself, which will help you to keep track of further goals and revisions and editing, and it breaks it down into the different areas to look at. So that's one thing I will definitely be doing. But they also are enabling you to continue your word counts on your projects now at Nano, so that if you keep writing and you haven't finished the book, you can keep adding to that word count now, which I think is also really neat. What are some of your plans for what's going to happen now at this point? Do you have new writing goals? Are you going to keep working on some of the things you're doing? But what are your Nano plans? How many of you are looking at Camp Nano in April or July? So let's start with Katie.
So I ended up writing a lot of little things. One of the things that Sue was talking about with not being able to focus on anything outside the pandemic, I really struggled to find a story that I could focus on. And so I wrote a lot of little things, little short stories, and just whatever came to mind, because I couldn't focus on a long novel. I did find a novel in there somewhere. I think it's going to come out eventually, but I didn't get very far into it. So one of the things I did work on was a blog challenge that will be coming up in April, that I also have been involved with for a few years, but that's the A to Z blog challenge, where you make alphabet posts each day of the month, save the Sundays. And so I started some stories for that. And so I will be continuing to work on that project and getting that going. And then I'll be hopefully ready to post those by April. But I have found the best success I have with posting consistently is writing in advance, and using Nano to help me with that endeavor has been super helpful. So that's what I'm looking at. And I would like to finish the novel that I started. I didn't get very far, but I have a good idea of where I want it to go. So hopefully that will come out. I am 100% a pantser. I sit down at the beginning of the month with a list of names, so I don't have to think of names, and that's literally it. And then I just write in Scrivener. So that's me.
Great. Okay. Sue Monroe, what's on your agenda for January, February, March, April, May, whatever?
Well, I will tell you that December is, Advent. So I write Advent stuff. So every month, every day is a new story for each of the 25, 26 days of Christmas. I will be taking part in Camp Nano. My library does writing prompts the first Thursday of every month. We have 7 prompts over the course of the evening. And that is open to anybody who is interested in joining us. That is a Facebook program for the Emmaus Public Library. And we've had some really interesting and incredible stories, even if they're only 6-word stories, or they could be a couple of paragraphs. we've had some very different things, and I know that I've gotten some story ideas from there that I'm going to be working on in the future. I am going to be doing a lot of editing because I kind of want to take the story that I had fallen into and take it someplace. It hasn't got where it's going yet, so I need to work on that. But I also need to do a lot of cutting because it's very, very wordy. So
How about Bob? What you've got on the burners for coming up?
I am hopefully going to be getting into an MFA program in the next couple months. My current writing project is working on, cover letter, sample pieces, that kind of thing. That's really my big idea, because depending on what writing I need to do for that would affect what other writing I do for the year. I'm still hoping to do at least November Nano next year. Whether I'll get into camp or not will depend on what goes on with that. Also thinking about doing some blogging. It's one of those things where I've, said I was going to do it for years and I never really did. So maybe doing something with Katie so that we can hold each other accountable, that sort of thing.
Great. Okay, how about Sue Reabuck? What's your next thing on the list?
Well, I want to work on my paranormal romance novel that I've been working on. And usually over the winter, I try to find some anthologies and submit short stories for them. I find a nice little challenge it challenges me to try to write different things. I have a lot of editing to do. However, I don't like editing. So I usually do that in the summer out on the patio. So that'll be my summer project, is all the editing. I like to sit outside where it's pretty and I don't feel so bad about editing my stuff.
And how about Mitzi? What do you have coming up for January or for the coming year?
Actually, what I'm doing is I'm working on a series of articles from medium.com about nursing. I spent 3 days, excuse me, in the emergency ward last week, and it was difficult. It was Dante's Circles of Hell, really, really bad. And I'm concerned about nursing. The nurses, I'm concerned about our healthcare workers. As a former RN, I am really concerned about what we're putting them through. And I think speaking from the bed as a nurse is something that needs to be done. And since Medium has a very large following of bloggers and readers, I thought that would be the place to start. So I've got it started. I've got it started on the computer, started in my head. So that's what I'm working on. I'll probably go back to the novel. And Laurel, I'm writing some short stories. And I'm like Susan, I'm going to try to get them into some anthologies. Being a writer, everybody thinks being a writer is easy. You just sit down and put words on a page. It is one of the hardest jobs. And when they say you open up a vein, you do. Maybe it's even an artery. It spurts. It's very hard. And that's one of the best things about Nano is that you're not really doing it alone. And you need a group around you. You need a group like Glivwig. You need a group like Nano. You need a group like the Lehigh Valley Nano Writers. You need that kind of support. And that's what's been good about the Easton Book Festival. It shows that there is support for writers out there.
That's so true. And everything you just said was so accurate in terms of, we need that support. We need to have people that will hold us accountable and support us when we're not sure. And that it's not easy. I've already had I've got readers who are saying, well, you're writing book 3. When is it going to be ready? I want you to finish it now. And it's just kind of like, it doesn't work that way. I wish it could, but my plans right now are to get it. I've self-published my book. So my goal is to have it self-published July 1st. And then the last one of the series, December 1st. which basically means I need to get it finished and my first set of revisions done by March 1st to give it to beta readers, to then still have another month to come back and do my final revisions. So it's a tight work, and there are times when you just are up against that deadline, and if I don't set those deadlines for myself, I tend to not meet them. I just kind of push it off and push it off. So that's one thing that Nano has helped me, is in terms of actually writing down what your goals are. Because if you have a visible, concrete goal in front of you, even if you don't meet it, you at least know what you're working toward, instead of like, oh, well, I'm going to finish it. When it might be 5 years from now. That's okay. Make that the goal. But for me, I need to have those concrete. I'm just so detail oriented. Like, I have to have the outline. And then writing is teaching me that you can have all the plans and the goals in the world, but the process sometimes just is very different, because the characters take you in a different direction and you just have to go. Excuse me. We're going to finish up now we're going to kind of combine the last two items that I had on the outline, because you all had your outlines. But to kind of just close off, what was the biggest lesson that you might have learned this week, or the biggest piece of advice that maybe you can share having done Nano? And will you be doing Nano again? I think that it's probably an absolutely with all of you, because it seems like we're all, once you're in it, you just can't leave. So let's start with Sue Reabuck. Let's start with you. Biggest lesson or piece of advice, and then I'm assuming you'll be doing Nano again.
Yes, I will definitely be doing Nano again. I really enjoy it. Biggest thing. I mean, my thing is just, it gets me in the headspace to write. I mean, and that, sometimes life is just, and if you don't take that time for yourself, I think a lot of times we don't put ourselves first. We don't let ourselves, be that, we say, well, this has to get done. This has to get done. And Nano really lets me put myself in a place where I can say, you know what, no, I'm going to write, and it reminds me to just take that time and do it for me, and that it is okay to put myself first sometimes.
That's great advice too. Self-care is important. You can't put something on a page if you're not taking care of yourself. Sue Monroe, what is your final thought? And I'm sure you're doing Nano again because you've got teen writers depending on you.
Well, I'm doing it for myself. But I will tell you, write for yourself. Write what you want to read. Write the things that you want to write about. Do not worry that you are not good enough or that you are not a writer. Everyone is a writer. Everyone comes up with stories, and everyone has the possibility to do Nano. It is the simplest thing, even if you don't make 50,000 words.
Amen. Bob, what's your final thoughts? And I'm assuming you'll be doing this again.
I do plan to be doing it again. I think somehow I got put in charge of stuff. So I guess I have to. And I think my biggest takeaway from this year was I moved out of my genre a little bit. I write a lot of action-y sci-fi fantasy, and I kind of moved into something a little more low-key and character-driven, and it was fun to stretch out a little bit.
Okay, Katie, haven't gone to you yet.
So in this November, I made so many new friends that was completely unexpected. Some of whom I had only met once or twice before, some of whom I've still never met. And I assume I will at some point. But Bob called me out the other day about something that I said on the 31st of October going into November about the fact that I expected to spend a lot of my time in November sitting in the Panera parking lot and crying. It turned out that I spent most of my parking lot time in the Burger King parking lot, not Panera, but I did not spend it crying at all. I spent it writing and laughing and talking to my friends in virtual environments. And so my biggest lesson or takeaway was that I had to embrace the moment. I had to really, even though it was a difficult time, I had to really embrace the change and look at the positive side of things. And there was a lot of good that came out of my November. There was never a chance I was going to give up on Nano. I will probably do it from now until the day I die. But I thought it was going to be a very painful year. I thought there was no way I was ever going to be successful. I might hit the 50,000, but my goal was 100. But I did it, and I did it because I was able to get the support of that community, even though it was virtual, which it was not my preference. It was not what I expected, but you know, Mitzi said a couple of things. We had one of our members move to upstate New York. She was able to join us many times because it's virtual. So it was a great opportunity to make those connections again and make new connections. And so, you know, just embrace the moment. Take what you have and run with it, because you never know what's going to happen. And sometimes that change and that unexpected thing is good.
Mitzi, final thoughts.
Absolutely agree with Kate. And absolutely agree with Sue. We're all writers. And don't knock yourself out because you did not get to 50K. Maybe next year. And that's what I have to internalize. Just because I didn't finish the novel doesn't mean I'm not a writer. I finished several short stories. I finished some articles on Medium. So I am a writer. I am a writer. That is what I take away from this. And yes, I will do Nano again. I'll probably do it every year.
Okay, and I guess my final thought, the major lesson that I learned is to trust the process. I call it trusting the muse, because I have a lot of conversations, but there are parts of the month that you are going to have control over. There are parts of the process that you're not going to like very much, but to just trust the process, because in the end, at the other end of the month, you are going to have more creativity that has come out of you and created something. Whether or not it's a complete finished work, it doesn't matter. You've become more of who you are by putting the words on the page. And someday, whether or not you publish or you're just sharing it with, you know, a friend or two, someday the words that you write might really, really touch somebody's heart. And that's really what being a writer is, as far as I'm concerned. It's just making a difference and touching somebody. So trust the process. It's okay if it doesn't go the way you think it's going to, because in the end, you're still going to learn tons about the craft and meet some great people. We want to thank the Easton Book Festival again for having us as a part of all of this. We're looking forward to the day when the Easton Book Festival is in person again. But as we were saying earlier, when I was talking to Andy, if it hadn't been virtual, we might not have been having this panel. So, you know, there's positives in all of it. So thank you all so much for being a part of this. This has been a great panel to be a part of. I've enjoyed the process, and I hope to meet some of you in person in the year ahead. And I'm going to turn it back over to Andy to close up.
Well, thank you, Laurel. Thank you for all the panelists. That was a really inspiring way to conclude the Easton Book Festival for 2020. We plan to have more virtual, and hopefully by the middle of the year, at least some more in-person programs. And thank you, everybody who tuned in, and we'll see you next year.
Bye-bye.
Good night.